Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Personable. Today I'm hugely honoured to be joined by Guy Kinnings. Guy is hugely successful, being the Deputy CEO of the European Tour Group as well as the Chief Commercial Officer, and he is also the Executive Director of the Ryder Cup. I feel hugely honoured to be joined by Guy today, and I'm very excited for our conversation.
Harvey, good to see you, Dan. Very kind of you. Nice intro. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Guy. So I wanted to get started by asking you very quickly to sum up those roles and what exactly do each of those mean?
Yeah, it's a good question because no one should really have three titles. The reason I do is because, and I'm sure we'll touch on it, I've worked in golf for many decades, and I was at a firm called IMG when I chose about 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, to leave there. I came to work at what was the European Tour Group, and we have now rebranded the main tour as the DP World Tour. I joined to run the Ryder Cup. It's an event I've always loved. So I came in as the Ryder Cup director, now executive director of the Ryder Cup. But also, I think they chose to involve me in some aspects of the tour as well. Obviously, the Ryder Cup is an event, happens every 2 years. We run over 100 events a year on the tour across 3 different tours. So I came in as the deputy CEO, and then about maybe a year after that, I took on the role of the Chief Commercial Officer, which is something I'd covered in passing at IMG. So that's how I've ended up with the 3 roles. Obviously, with what's happened recently, my focus has been largely on the Ryder Cup, but there's also been a huge amount going on in golf. So that's how I've ended up with the 3 monikers.
Amazing. How did you, sort of backtracking a lot, what was your sort of like journey like as a teenager going to university, and what were your initial career plans, and then how did that transition towards golf?
I was I left school having studied kind of classics, English history, and played a lot of sport, fairly mediocrely, but loved it, and in lots of different areas. Ended up at university, and I studied law, and I studied law not because I had this burning desire to go and be a lawyer. I kind of liked the idea of it and had watched lots of legal dramas, things like that. But the truth was, I kind of felt what I'd studied lent itself, and law didn't close a lot of doors. It gave you this kind of learning that hopefully would be applicable wherever I ended up. And again, at uni, I was very lucky. I went to Oxford. I got to study law there, and I got to play a lot of college, some university sport at fairly modest levels. But I, funnily enough, joined a sports club, the Vincent's Club, and worked there. Did some stuff on the committee there, and there was that sort of thought, maybe I could work in sport in some way, but I still graduated. I went and studied at Freshfields, a fantastic Magic Circle law firm. Ended up doing qualifying in the company commercial area. Had the most wonderful time, but and was thoroughly enjoying it. But when the opportunity arose, because I was still young and feckless, and someone came along working for Mark McCormack, who had kind of invented the sports business. The opportunity came along then to go and work there, and I thought, oh, that's wonderful. I'll immediately go and work in sport. The reality was you just can't go in and do that. I went in as an in-house lawyer and ended up running the legal department, and then I transferred into where I kind of wanted to be, which was sports. So I'd love to claim it was all part of a grand plan. It really wasn't. These things happen, and it's what you make of them. But I'm really glad I studied what I studied. I'm glad I did classics, strangely enough. Not that it seems very applicable. I'm really glad I studied law, and working in the city as a lawyer was fantastic. So although they're not used every day, I think some of the skills I picked up there are kind of useful where I've ended up in working in sport.
How did you transition from the law department to what you did? And do you think something like that is still possible in today's world?
It's a very good question, because it was then, funnily enough, a very good route to get into sport. I think things have changed. So when I went there, Mark McCormack, who had founded not just IMG, but when he shook hands with Arnold Palmer in 1963, he kind of created the whole sports marketing business. And Mark was a lawyer, and a pretty good lawyer. He's also a good golfer. He got to play in I think it was the US Open, and he ends up standing on the range, hitting balls pretty well. And then he's conscious that the guy next to him is hitting him, and it makes a different noise, and it goes a different distance. And he's like, wow, And of course, it's Arnie. And he turns and they become lifelong friends and lifelong business partners. And Arnie was the start of the first client of IMG. And Mark from there signed up Jack, signed up Gary, signed up, Sir Jackie Stewart and Rod Laver and John Killian and all those clients. But he did it having been a lawyer. So funnily enough, those days, going in as a lawyer or on the financial side was a really good training to then transition out. So I'd been working in the legal department, and I'd been doing contracts in the golf area, which was a very big part of the business, in tennis, which was very big. And funnily enough, in fashion and in classical music. I self-evidently know nothing about fashion. I knew less about classical music side. I enjoyed, though not a absolute, I played many other sports, but golf was still relatively new to me. But I enjoyed working on the golf side. So I was doing contracts, and we were incredibly lucky, or maybe Mark knew what he was doing. There was this amazing generation of pro golfers, all born within a year of each other. And it was Sir Nick Faldo and Woozy, Sandy Lyle, I think it was Nicky Price, Greg Norman, Bernard Langer. I think they were all born with, I think Seve as well, were all born within a year of each other. And Mark ended up managing almost all of those, not Seve, but all of the others. And I was working on the legal side for that. And I think I had what may have been the only career talk I ever had, which was my then boss, a gentleman I think called Ian Todd, who called me in and said, you shouldn't be doing the legal stuff. And I'm like, oh, I thought that's what they did. And he went, no, you should be managing. And that was it. I ended up working with two brilliant golfers who then were, both had come from the county where I was brought up in Shropshire. That was Sandy Lyle and Ian Wisden. And they were the guys I ended up working with initially. And then from there, I so I effectively became an agent. And handed over the legal to people who did it infinitely better than I did. And then went from there and worked with them, and then got to sign some of my own clients and inherited some others. And that's how I ended up. It was through great golfing ability. It was kind of knowing what they did, how their businesses were being managed legally. And it made that transition easier. And your question is a good one, because I think that is still possible. And I think there are still people who've done that, who've worked as lawyers and moved across. I was at the Rugby World Cup at the weekend with Alan Gilpin, who does a brilliant job there. But he, like me, I think started as a lawyer and moved over. I think now people tend to maybe specialize earlier and come with skill sets in, it may be legal and finance, but it may well be in marketing, or it may be in sports management, or it may be in all of these different areas. So I think people tend to go in and stay in those roles a little bit more. But that was how it worked then, and it had worked for Mark. Ian Todd had also been legally trained, and a lot of the people who had been there at IMG at that kind of boom time, I mean, the business was growing exponentially into all of the areas from golf into media and whatever. A number of them had been trained legally and financially, which I think I remember one client, Monty, always used to say it's kind of handy to have an Oxford qualified lawyer managing. I think he probably learned to regret that, but the notion was,
at least he could say it.
He could say it exactly, and it sounded good, even if he knew it was holding him back. But he was kind enough to still let me do it.
Do you think you had any inherent skills that made you so good at this role, and what sort of value were you providing to these players that made them want to work with you over someone else or another firm?
It's well, I'm certainly not going to claim any inherent skills. I've been lucky throughout. I've had the most wonderful time doing all this stuff. When I went in, I think that, there were a lot of people who work and manage players, and they have lots of different skill sets. And there are those who've played the sport at the highest level, which self-evidently was not me. It was those that have been on tour and experienced it. My knowledge and skill set when I went in there was legal training, and so I knew my way around the contracts that ultimately we would be generating for them. And hopefully my bosses had seen something that meant that they thought I would be able to communicate with those people and within the business. You also, to be honest, to do it, you gotta love the sport, and I do. I love other sports, but I love working in golf. and the people I've met and the values and all the stuff that goes with golf and makes it such an attractive event, albeit a niche event, sport, it is a very attractive sport. So, I had a love of the game, a bit of a knowledge of it, a respect for it. To be a good agent, you really got to park your ego to do it properly. At the end of the day, you know who the talent is, and you know who needs to be front of house. And you need to be able to ready park that ego, get stuck in, roll up sleeves, do the menial along with the creative and whatever. I was lucky enough to be part of, and I worked with, an amazing team across everyone at IMG, particularly in the golf team. And I worked there during the McCormack era, which was amazing because the man who's founded the whole business, and he was an absolute inspiration, mentor to me. But equally, there were others. There were people who worked with him, Alistair Johnson, Bob Kane, when Mark sadly passed. Got to work with Teddy Forsman, with Ari Emanuel, who ran that business. These are, amazing people. And it was a privilege, and you got to learn how to do these things in different ways. So I wouldn't say it was inherent skills. I think there are lots of different ways. The only thing that really matters to a player, a client, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what you've done, they got to trust you. The reality is you, whether it's a broadcaster or a sponsor or a promoter of an event, they don't want to deal with an agent. In reality, they want to deal with the player, the talent. Therefore, but they can't, because guess what? The talent's got to be away practicing, preparing, or playing. Therefore, they've got to deal with you. That player has to trust that you will represent them as well as if they were there, and in some cases, hopefully better. And in the end, it all comes down to trust. You look at many reasons why you work with players, and I've been incredibly lucky. I've worked with the most amazing talent and amazing personalities. At the end of the day, be like, well, what have you done? You need to make sure they're commercially well off. You need to have good career advice. You need to advise and avoid pitfalls. At the end of the day, they just got to trust you for that. So I've always believed that the single most important thing is God, I messed up the whole time. These guys knew this. I've been sacked by the best of them. But in the end, they got to trust that you're going to do the best you can. And I think that's what is at the heart of doing that job, for whether you're working with players, whether you're working with commercial partners, whether you're working with other people, whoever they are you represent, they got to trust you.
If you created this trust and you managed to work with some of the world's best players, was there ever a part of you that thought of maybe going to another firm, another sport, or starting your own firm within golf to do a similar thing? Why did you stay at the same firm for so long?
I did. You know what? I had to explain this. I remember when Teddy Forsman bought the business from the McCormack estate. And it wasn't just me. There were a number of others who'd been there for, a number of years, 20 years. And he's like, you could see him thinking, why are you so lacking in ambition? You all hit it. The reason was, in reality, when I went to IMG, they were absolutely the market leader in sports management. Now, there are a lot of other utterly brilliant firms that have come along since then and do a wonderful job. And certainly in golf, we were the market leaders. And whether it was on the talent side, on the event side, on the media side, every aspect, we were the best. And we had the best client base, and it was wonderful. Now, these things always evolve. For me, I post-rationalized not moving around. One, I knew I worked better in a big organization. I know my limitations, and I knew I needed people who did things better than I could in the different areas, because it's not just one person managing a player or running an event. It's a huge team. You may front it. They are all there doing the hard work. You're taking the credit. So one, I knew I needed a team. So I was never going to go work on my own. I absolutely didn't want to do that. Plus, I loved working with a lot of talent, a lot of events, all aspects of the sport. And if you go on your own, you are ultimately going to get more limited to work with just either one individual, however brilliant that individual is, or one event or whatever. So one, I like the variety. Two, I love the people there, and I love the business and the way it was run. And my role evolved. So I started out as a low-life agent, scuttling around on tour doing that. I then got to run the client business. I then got to run the overall golf business. I then moved away from more around players into big corporations we represented, governing bodies. I worked incredibly closely with the RNA and others. So for me, although I was there for an inordinate amount of time, never felt like that.
Yeah.
Because one, the role kept changing. Two, the people you were with, although I got to work with a lot of brilliant people for a very long time, there was always change, and there were always people coming in at senior level, junior level that kept it fresh. And it's, whatever you say, and I love my time as a lot, but it is fun. We are privileged to get to work with these amazing players, amazing events. I can't quite believe that, I get to work on the Ryder Cup, which I just think is maybe the best. I think it's the best thing in golf. I'm biased. I'll offend others because there are other brilliant events. I kind of think it's one of the best things in sport, and you get to work on it. And, sure, it's hard work, and sure you did, but you have to occasionally pinch yourself and stand there and go, look what I'm doing. And so that was the case. I had no desire till the opportunity arose to go and work on the Ryder Cup, which for me was the thing. I had no real desire, and I had looked around at other things, and they either weren't right at the right time, or, ultimately I was very happy, and I signed off going, couldn't have had a better time there. Wonderful organization. And then I got to go to another brilliant organization. So I've been lucky.
That's amazing. I mean, I was going to ask you about the DP World Tour, but while we're on the topic of the Ryder Cup, I'd be curious, as with an event like that that's so world famous, how you balance the mix between innovating, improving in both the revenue, the content of the few days, versus maintaining the tradition and keeping the players happy. How do you balance those two out with a tournament like that?
Yeah, that's a very, very pertinent question at any time, but it's particularly relevant right now. Funnily enough, working in golf full stop, you have to an extent balance that, because golf isn't football. It isn't a huge global sport. It punches way above its weight. It is a niche sport but is global, is growing demographically, growing commercially, and more people are being brought in than ever. So it's a boom time for golf. But what you balance, exactly as you've asked, is it is centered in history and honesty and integrity. And the reason the sport is so appealing to fans and to, ABC ones, to C-suite executives, to big companies, is because it embodies all this kind of self-policing. Old and young can play together, male, female, handicapping. You can truly play against Tiger Woods because of handicapping. The reality is you can't knock up against Federer. You can't drive against a Hamilton because it's just... So we're very lucky. We have a pro-am where you get to play for 3 or 4 hours with your true heroes and you can compete. So golf has all of these inherent values that you have to nurture. And whether that is the Ryder Cup, which has this near 100-year history of true sporting excellence, but played in the right value. Players do not get paid. They play for their country, their continent, each other, their captain, and you can see they know they're playing for something bigger and different, and that's why it's different from any other event. And you do need to innovate, as you've rightly said. You cannot sit still. Unless you're progressing, you are standing still. So we did, 20, 25 things differently in Rome and tried things out, and we'll do more, and we'll do more when we go to New York in 25. We'll do more when we go to Adair Manor in Ireland in 27. But you have to do them in a way that improves the experience for the players, for the spectators, for the viewers, for everyone. Grow, improve, whatever, but still, to my mind, respect what is all about the essence of the game. So people go, the Ryder Cup, it's amazing. Why don't we play it every year? And you know what? It's great for 3 days. Let's do 4. The problem is you analyze it, and what you would do is, I believe, take away the essence of what that event is. And we built out the week in advance. People had astonishing experiences in Rome. We had a welcome ceremony we've never had before. We adapted the opening ceremony. We had the junior Ryder. We had all of these things. But in the end, it's what happens inside the ropes from Friday morning till Sunday evening. And you see what those players did, both teams, was astonishing, absolutely astonishing. Privileged to watch because, you could see how much it meant to them. It was the Ryder Cup is very fortunate. Even when it isn't close, it feels close. And that was close. And that was a real amazing, so many stories, so many interwoven stuff. So you had these 3 days of utterly compelling viewing. And I will never forget when I was given the chance to work on it, I was undecided. I was very happy where I was, a lovely place. And I mentioned to my brother, and who is not a sports man, and he doesn't follow it very closely. He does other things very well. And he said, "You do know that's the event that our mother had just passed." He said, "That's the one that she used to lock the doors, put the phone off the hook, get the ready meals in, and literally no one would disturb her." And I think people feel a very different way about the Ryder Cup, whether they're there and they experience, and I've had so many amazing messages after Rome of people going, "We just had this amazing experience." People who watched it on the TV, listened to it on the radio, consumed it in bite-sized stuff. All of those things, they all went, that was something really special. And that's where sport becomes something that is so compelling. It's passionate, it's tribal. The Ryder Cup is tribal. It's everything, those crowds, polite golf crowds who normally clap when someone makes a birdie are chanting on the first tee, the two groups. And it just hair on the back of your neck stuff. So I think you rightly point out, it's a mixture of the two. You have to innovate, improve, make sure we do things better, but respect the history of that sport and that event.
That's insane. What were some of you've touched on a lot of them. What were some of your goals going into this Ryder Cup of how to make it different and how to improve it? And did it work? And what worked?
Yeah, well, I'll leave it for others to decide if it worked, but the general reaction seems to be that the event went well. I mean, it was interesting. The Ryder Cup was, let's be honest, it was founded 1927 when Samuel Ryder handed over a little gold trophy. Got some replicas lurking behind. And for a long time, it did not capture imagination. It was a great event, but America won more often than not. And it really didn't capture everyone's imagination. Then suddenly, 1979, GB and I realized they needed some help from some Europeans. And in come this generation of Spaniards and Germans and Italians. And you look at these, and of course Seve led it. And of course it was Seve and Ollie and Bernard Langer and Fran Molnar and others have done this. But they transformed the event. So suddenly from 79 onwards, Europe were competitive. And the event developed this extraordinary history of people winning it against, let's be honest, unbelievable American teams, brilliant American teams. And somehow these little underdogs, these European underdogs, would rally every 2 years to win at home, and we've won at home now for 34 years, but also win away sometimes. The Miracle of Medina, who will ever forget it? The first time we won it when Tony Jacklin led the team to win it. So the event became something that was very cherished in the game, amazing asset, and it grew in size and scale and value every match. I arrived in time to be there to be overseeing what they did in Paris. Hadn't done all the preparatory work, but I arrived there for it. And Paris was amazing, really amazing. Brilliant tournament. Thomas Bjorn led the team brilliantly, amazing team effort. And it was a superb event. And everyone went, how do you top that? And it was really interesting because we sat down and we went, yeah, no, they're right, really good. But we could do this, we could do that, we could do the other. And you're always changing because you're going from a great European capital in Paris to Rome. And Rome was under 10 miles away from the golf course. Now, there are practical challenges. Golf is not a massive sport in Italy. I think in a survey, it was voted their 15th most popular pastime before the event. We have moved it a bit. So, you're going, we've got to pull it off in a country that's new to it. We've never staged a Ryder Cup there. And you're building, and there were delays. COVID came, and you're building a new course, effectively a new course, although it was adapting an old one. So all of these variables, but you were conscious that you were within striking distance of this amazing city. So we staged events at and around the Colosseum, on the Spanish Steps, around the Trevi Fountain, all of these sort of things, which adds a certain something to any sporting event. But also what was so interesting is in between Paris and Rome, we'd gone to Whistling Straits, and the Americans had a very record convincing victory. And it was tough. It was tough. There was no European travelling fans. Roderick Harrington did a great job, but it was very tough. And we got thumped. And the American perception was, you know, it's going to be tough to do in Italy. And you know what? It's going to be, you can't see that American team losing for a decade. And people had even said that. So you've got the challenges of taking an event of this scale to a new market. You've also got, with Luke Donald, who didn't even have a full run at it. You know, he came in a little bit later in the process. And he's having to galvanize a team to go up against what they know will be a brilliant American team. And so inside and outside the ropes, Rome completely exceeded all expectations. Because Luke, get that right, did an utterly brilliant job. I mean, he really was an outstanding captain. He had brilliant vice captains, and the team just responded. Superstars played well. The rookies were fantastic. What they produced was an utterly compelling performance, which was incredibly exciting. So, it worked really well inside the ropes, and we will all remember those moments. I mean, that was just so many. I can't list them all, but there were so many. But outside the ropes, it also worked. And guess what? The sun came out. It was amazing crowds, marvelous Italian food, great entertainment. It just became this exceptional event. And we now have to move on and go, how do we improve still from there? But yeah, that was the goal, was just to make it every time bigger and better, each cycle on cycle.
Do you, it sounds like a stupid question, but is there a representative from the US side as well? And you work with them, or are you doing the overall Ryder?
No, it's a good question.
You talk about Europe a lot.
I do.
And I wonder if any of the US players are like, come on, can't the people leading the tournament having favourites? Maybe they change the whole,
Well, and it's because I'm allowed to be partisan, because at the moment, the way the Ryder Cup is run, and that's why it's unique. Ryder Cup Europe run the event every 4 years. The PGA of America run the event every 4 years. And so I have counterparts at the PGA of America with whom we work incredibly closely. And they will run the event. So they ran the event at Whistling Straits. They will run the event at Bethpage Black in New York in 25. We ran the event in Paris. Rome will run it in Adair. So although we work closely together in terms of global sponsorship deals, media deals, we collaborate on areas like merchandise and consumer. And we assist. It is very much US against Europe. And therefore, I speak about Europe because my responsibility was to stage it in Rome. I will not stage it in New York. My counterparts at the PGA of America will do it, and will do it very well. So it is an interesting one. It is not a property that's run by the same team. It's run by different teams. And that, people could go, well, how do you ensure consistency? Well, we ensure consistency by working together. We may fight like hell inside the ropes, but outside the ropes, we collaborate very closely with the PGA of America. And also, in a sense, it has to feel different. Rome felt different. There is a home advantage. You probably have the larger number in the crowds. The captain can slightly tinker how the course is set up. When we go to New York, they will encounter some of the most vocal, passionate golf fans anywhere on the planet. And that's why when Rory was talking about it afterwards, he said, were Luke to choose to go again, it would be astonishing if he succeeded, because it's really tough to win away. And that's why so often win at home. And then, so for us to go and win in New York, for the European team to win in New York would be a huge challenge. But I talk about Europe. If you were to ask someone at the PGA of America, they would talk just as passionately about doing it, because we all have this love of the event. And in a sense, it needs to feel different. You're going to a New York Ryder Cup. You want to experience New York in the same way that I think people left Rome going, amazing sporting event, and wow, did the Eternal City deliver or not? So it almost needs to have that little bit of difference. It's a tribal event. It needs to be run by the two tribes.
You talk about these two tribes and collaborating during this time. But aside from that, do you and the PGA Tour, do you guys view each other as enemies? Do you view them as competition, or merely just people to compare yourselves to?
It's two different bodies. And to be clear, on the Ryder Cup, you have the PGA of America. That's the body that represents the club pro.
Sure.
So we're competitive. We want to run the best event. We want our team to do well. But equally, we're conscious that we are custodians of the same event staged every 2 years. So we have to work closely together. And luckily enough, the CEO, Seth Waugh's a good friend, and all of the all of the other senior staff on all this, they're people we work very closely with. So we do collaborate. In answer to your question on the PGA Tour, because that's a sort of tour question, historically, you would have said, yeah, the tours are competitive because you would fight for the talent. Are they going to play on that tour or this tour? Fight for the commercial. But obviously, and I know how well researched you are on this, in recent years, we have struck a strategic alliance with the PGA Tour, and we now work incredibly closely with them to make sure that you make sure the best global talent gets to play where it wants to. So I would say probably in the past we were more competitive. We still remain extremely competitive. You can see how much those players truly want to beat each other. And that's why you can't make this stuff up. It's got to be real. You can't manufacture it. There is real intensity. And they may look each other in the eyes and shake hands afterwards. They really want to win at the time. And there is no let up on that. But equally, those of us who are lucky enough to work around that talent, sure, there is an element where there is competitive tension, but in reality, it's our job to work as well as we can to ensure, A, the Ryder Cup as a property gets better, but for us, the two tours, we've got to make sure professional golf is in a better place. And we can only do that by working together, and we do incredibly closely with.
Transitioning more into the tour side, I know you say you're working more with them now, but I'm still curious, apart from sort of geographical locations, how would you say that you can differentiate yourself from something like the PGA Tour? Because you're still competing on things like viewing numbers, just trying to bring in as much revenue. So how do you differentiate yourself playing the same sport and the way that it's run, and the way that it's filmed, and the way that it's presented, the way that you interact with the agents and the players and all of that side?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic you raise, because the reality is golf is a really complicated sport not to play, to understand and view it, but the organization of golf is incredibly complicated. And there are 7, 8, 9 global tours in the men's game. And then you've got the women's game. And then you've got federations, and you've got the amateur game, and you've got the junior game. And now we've created the golf for the disabled. So golf is huge and tricky to understand global picture. Where we work together, and you've got to remember, you've got to know what our job is. Others will have responsibilities to grow the game at grassroots and whatever. PGA Tour is responsible for the members of its tour who are the elite, the best of the best on the PGA Tour, and the PGA Tour now attracts a lot of great players from around the world, from any number of countries. The European Tour, as it was, now the DP World Tour, has always been, its heartland has been in Europe. We've developed into the Middle East, into Africa, to Australia, and into Asia. And we built this history up. And so there is, of course, as you rightly say, where are the players going to play? Where are the sponsors going to go? Where are the broadcasts going to go? But if you can make the two tours work in a compatible way, also working with the other tours, you've got to remember the Japan Tour is still it's the second biggest national market. Golf in Korea is huge. Great in Australia, South Africa, Middle East. We do a lot of golf there. China has embraced golf in a way. So if we can all find a way of working together with all our own unique styles, and you look at the history of our 40 events on the DP World Tour, some of them have 50, 100 years of history. And these events are big events in their own right. And therefore you play to your strengths. You say, hey, we have these big events. The best players in the world may want to play on the PGA Tour in America for some part of the year. Luckily enough, we have a lot of players who like to travel, and they will come and play in Europe, in the Middle East, in Australia, South Africa, and Asia. And therefore, if you don't coordinate, you run up with instances where big events against each other, and then that's counterproductive. You then have unhappy broadcasters, unhappy sponsors. What you've got to do is to find a way, listen to the players, work with them, as you say, work with all the other stakeholders, agents and others, then try and create a global structure. And we don't by any means say we've got it absolutely right. And part of the stuff that's going on right now is you try and integrate everything that you want to have between PGA Tour, DP World Tour, what PIF want to do and integrate in all of that is all about finding a way that you can create a compelling global offering that will work for the players, will appeal to broadcasters, will appeal to commercial partners. And that's why you keep needing to refine it. And there is no harm in it being challenged and changed. We need to improve the whole time. And we are now in the throes of working out what will be the best global golfing offering. And then you hope everything else can fall in with that because, the growth in the women's game has been brilliant. Let's not forget, you had a wonderful Solheim Cup the week before, the Ryder Cup. Suzanne Pettersson came with her husband to the Ryder Cup. And, she did a wonderful job, inspiring that team. And that was amazing. So you want to nurture all of that. So if we can get our job right, we just do the tour. You then look at what the RNA, the USGA do for amateur golf, the LPGA do for the top level for the ladies. There's got to be a way of trying to coordinate, to attract investment in, find the right product. And we are by no means there yet, but we're working on it. And hopefully it'll allow golf. As I said, there's an interest in golf like almost never before. It's our job to try and find a way of capturing and galvanizing that interest to make sure that the game is stronger going forward.
With the integration of Live Golf and how that's changed the game, how has that changed your perspectives on the traditional game of golf? With a lot of players, leaving these traditional tours and going to new competitions, we've mentioned before balancing creating the balance between tradition and innovation. But then you've got a lot of these players leaving to go to completely new tournaments. How has that changed your perspectives on the game of golf and where it moves forward?
I think all anyone can ever do, if you face competition, and as I said, we're finding a way that hopefully we can all work together, and that would be a best thing for the game. But irrespective of that, competition's a good thing. You need to always be challenged to improve. The only thing you can really control, it's pretty difficult to control what other people do. All you can really do is try and control your own product. And if it's clear that the fans and the broadcasters and the sponsors want different things, then it's our job to go and look for those. And we've always tried to weave in things to our golfing product, because golf, whether it's 72 hole stroke play, whether it's match play like it is with Ryder Cup, whatever it may be, it's an adaptable format, and people come and they watch for 3 or 4 days or however long it may be. But, you can do things like we did at the BMW PGA Championship. You have concerts every evening. You have culinary experiences. You involve celebrities. And you bring all the things. At the moment, we're very lucky. We've got amazing people tend to be drawn to golf. And so to have Novak Djokovic and Carlos Sainz and Gareth Bale there at the Ryder Cup, and they were doing it, they're icons in their own sports, and yet they were there and they were enjoying it and whatever else. That brings a new audience in. So I think competition's a good thing. We have to always strive to improve our own product, and we need to work together with whoever it is that has a view and a voice in the game to try and find what is the best ultimate product. And those refinements are happening anyway, week on week, year on year. But, what's happened recently has maybe made things move faster. And, as long as we end up in the best place in the end with something that is what people want, then I think that's a good thing. And it's our job to go and try and make that happen.
I think you touched that it wasn't your job, but still being, one of the leading tours in the world, and particularly with the Ryder Cup, how do you see younger people getting involved in the sport? Because I don't know the actual numbers, but I think there's a bit of a presumption that a lot of older people play. I mean, I play golf, not very well, but I think there's a presumption that a lot of older people play golf and not as much younger people getting involved. So are there any efforts to try and get younger people involved? I mean, things like the Ryder Cup where it's more tribal, it can be perhaps even more exciting. What are your thoughts on that and trying to get that younger demographic?
I think it's the biggest and most important challenge we have. As you rightly say, golf has a perception of white middle-aged blokes in bad jumpers and, putting off.
I like your jumper.
Women, diverse, women, the female players and diverse different groups and the juniors. There's no doubt that the sort of, the private members club has not always been a obviously welcoming place. The single biggest opportunity we have, I believe, is to show that actually the game can appeal to all and to make golf accessible. And in the past, golf's been judged. It's always judged itself very hard. I mean, are you a golf fan? And you had to be, well, when did you last play 18 holes at a private club? Well, that is a very small group of people. So people who go to Topgolf, people who game, people who go to Putt Shack, people who go and do all of these things, they're involved in golf somewhere. They may only play 3 holes, 6 holes, 9 holes. They may go down, attracting mums after the school run, making the golf courses appealing to, as you say, the junior demographic. There is no doubt there is interest in the game for lots of reasons. But if you're being told don't come in any jeans and for sure don't bring your mobile, that you're going to limit the appeal to people. So it's not, our role is to deliver a tour for our members, but working with people like, as I said, the RNA and the USGA and others, and the PGAs who, help through the pros. It's all about an evolving process. If we know there is interest in the sport, we've got to make it more appealing. We've got to make it more interesting. In whatever way you want to consume it, people may not want to sit down and watch 4 hours of golf coverage, but if we can create compelling content with players who do help us, with celebrities who love the game, at the Ryder Cup, we played for the first ever time the Junior Ryder Cup singles on the Ryder Cup course itself on the Thursday morning. And that was to inspire them, but inspire others. I remember Luke, they came a few days early to practice, and Luke led the guys over the walkway that all the superstars were going to walk later in the week, walked them out into this amphitheatre of the first tee, where you got 7,000 people making as much noise as possible be. And when you're teeing off from here in 2 days' time, I mean, again, you can imagine they were wide-eyed. And boy, did they respond. I mean, it was the Ryder Cup, Junior Ryder Cup team played really well as well. So you're quite right. It is our job. And a lot of people talk about it and go, oh, yes, no, we've got to attract the junior audience. But it is the job of everyone who works in the game, in whatever capacity it is, to make it accessible. And, the RNA have done a lot of that. We've tried to, we have as a challenge tour to show a pathway for good amateurs to then get into the pro ranks, to achieve where they want to get at the top of the game. RNA have done a lot of this with programs. We all want to try and find a way. We at the tour have school outreach programs. We go out to schools. Whenever we go to a tournament, we go out, we have strong sustainability views. So we want to be relevant because people aren't going to be drawn to the sport unless you are sustainable environmentally and you support the Golf for Disabled tour, but also bring people in and get them to see what it means to be at a tournament, maybe even work in the sport. So I would say that the sport has made huge leaps in recent years. I've seen it for a very, very long time. And I think there's been a recognition that those are the most important audiences to draw in. I'm glad you're playing golf. You can play any sport you like. You've been drawn to golf. I mean, however badly you play, it won't be as bad as me. And I've been around it. I've learned you can't soak up a great swing by osmosis, sadly, but otherwise I just stood slightly closer to track.
I think everyone wants to believe that one. Though.
Everyone. Sadly, no, it's down to hard work. But the truth is, it is a tough sport because, you do have to work hard to get good at it. But as long as you make it appealing to everyone and they get to learn and they can go for lessons with the club pro and they can aspire to come to events and enjoy events. And, we build villages at these tournaments to make sure that people come with their families so that they can have a great experience and not just be defined by that. So I think the sport is in a state of change. That can only be a good thing. And as long as it makes it more appealing, we know the limitations. How can you make the game more and more robust and more appealing? It's down to everyone involved in it in some way or another.
How have you found that as you've expanded into new countries, how have you found that the demographics changed around the world as you start to host events in new countries, do similar events? Like, could you talk me through a bit of the demographic, both on the DP World Tour side and also on the Ryder Cup, and how you've seen that transition over the past few years and where that's headed?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the Ryder Cup is played on European soil, and where we choose to go is something that is thought about very carefully. If you look at how the game has grown, as people know, the biggest golfing market worldwide is North America. And then you have very strong markets, as we said, in Japan, in GB in Ireland, across continental Europe. But the sport has grown, and you see governments recognizing the appeal of a golfing economy. So people have built golf courses across the Middle East, in Thailand, in China, in Australia has wonderful golf courses. Same with South Africa. And they build a golfing tourism business, and there's a statistic which shows golf tourists spend a lot more, 7 or 8 times more than a regular tourist. But to capture the imagination in that sport, one, you've got to televise it there. 2, you've got to take events there, build the courses, and often you get you often get the real interest by visiting superstars. So we've been incredibly lucky from the 60s on. Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, they travelled the world. They played all over the world. And then we had the man who transformed the sport beyond any recognition. We've all been incredibly lucky. We lived through the Tiger era, and everyone in the sport should go and shake his hand every day, because he took the sport to somewhere that no one ever believed, and we never thought that golf would have the global athlete in it. And he travelled, and he, or many of the other superstars that we've been lucky enough to have, by then travelling, you then capture the imagination in that market that hopefully then breeds homegrown talent, and suddenly you have players emerging in that country. And I could, they went and played there. Then you have superstar Korean players, male and female. You have Chinese players coming through. You have all of this. So the way it works is we like to play our events where it works for our members. So at night, play when it's good weather. Can't play in Europe the whole time, so go around the world. Play on wonderful golf courses. Well, luckily enough, those are being built. Attract, let's be honest, the crowds come out to cheer on a Tiger or a Rory or a John Rahm or whoever it may be. But they also come out to, in New Zealand, they want to see Ryan Fox. They want to see, that they're heroes there. So you do it through a mixture of that, and then you try and make sure that it's a true global tour, and all of those elements come to play. The Ryder Cup's slightly different, because the Ryder Cup, as you know, have been played. It gets played at great courses around North America, and then it had been played in a lot of very good British golf courses. But as the event grew, and it was at the Belfry for many years, and it was a wonderful venue there, but there was a recognition, we need to take this further. One, look at what the Europeans have done. So it went to Scotland for the first time. It went to Wales the first time. It went to Ireland the first time. But it also then went to France. It went to Spain first, it then went to France, it's been to Italy, and you'll see wherever it goes. And there's an element to which you want to go to where you can stage an amazing event, but you also want to leave a legacy. And what is that legacy? Well, the legacy in France was a lot of urban golf courses. A lot of roads got built in Italy around the course, just in time, but they got built, and they will be there for the locals to enjoy. But you really want to see the sport to capture the imagination of the people. You want to see juniors coming through. Of course, you want to see more other people, the older generation playing at the golf clubs. There's a huge value in that. But what your real legacy is, you want them to they want juniors who went along to watch that event to be inspired to go and play golf, so that there is a next generation of great, hopefully Spanish, French, Italian players coming through. So it's a sort of dual responsibility between Tour and Ryder Cup. They're not dissimilar in principle, but there is a limit for us Europeans. The European Ryder Cup needs to be played in continental Europe. The DP World Tour goes to every corner, and that's a good thing. And you work with local tours there. We co-sanction there. So it's a sort of dual approach.
At both the Ryder Cup and the DP World Tour level, I mean, as you were saying with Tiger Woods, the brand and the messages and what they represent, the players, probably the most important thing, or one of the most important things in the game. But when they're so involved, how do you balance between taking on their advice and what they say, and then, I'm not going to mention any specific players, but when they sidetrack or perhaps don't present themselves in the best manner, that can then have a negative impact on the tour or on the Ryder Cup. So how do you balance them being an ambassador and a voice for the sport, but also saying, we don't agree with their views, or, how do you balance?
Generally, we're very lucky. I mean, to be honest, most of the players we have are wonderful ambassadors. They recognize the value in helping to grow the game, because it will be good for the game as a whole. They also build their own brands. And therefore, whatever any player does, whatever impacts on that person's brand. And we have to remember, they are from multiple different nations, different personalities, ages, male, female, whatever. And that means that, you have to accept that golf is an individual sport. They come together. The Ryder Cup works because team golf is when the Ryder Cup's played, it's a rarity. And that's why people love it. And it wouldn't work if you did it every week. So what you're doing, therefore, is going, it's an individual sport. Embrace the fact that there are different individuals. Although Tiger was pretty dominant, other players still won then. And so, there are always new people on the leaderboard, new leaders. So it's almost an essence of the sport that whilst the players can work with us, they are the stars. They will define how the sport is seen. They also are individuals and they will act in the same way. And we all know golf's a tough thing. They're on display for 4 or 5 hours and, they have to cope with adversity. You can get unlucky. You can play really well and the ball takes a funny bounce, whatever. So we expect a lot of them. They generally deliver really well. We are incredibly lucky that these players not only play beautifully, but conduct themselves as ambassadors, help film content and do things that just change the perception of the sport. So I think golf is in a very good place in terms of its talent.
Have you ever thought, this could also be a stupid question, so I don't know if you've got this already, but have you ever thought of doing like a sort of like Drive to Survive, like they did in Formula One, but for golf?
We have one. Full swing. Yeah, Full Swing is going. Season 2 will be released in February. I'm told it was the fastest recommissioned Netflix series. Season 1 was very successful. And season 2